Dust motes danced in the single shaft of morning sun slicing through the grimy window of yesterday. As echoes, Leo traced a finger across the chipped formica countertop, feeling the cool artificiality beneath his skin. He de-wiped it down 3 times already, a nervous habit. Jerome. Arizona population 473 and dwindling, according to the last census he bothered to look at. Didn't he offer much for a man attempting a fresh start, but it offered enough quiet. The bell above the door, a ridiculous thing he insisted on, despite its likely uselessness, jingled. Old man Hemlock, smelling faintly of mothballs and regret, shuffled in. "Mornin', Leo," Hemlock rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across asphalt. "Find anything new to clutter up the place," Leo smiled, a practiced expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just rearranging, Mr. Hemlock." Trying to make it look inviting, Hemlock snorted. "Inviting? This town ain't seen inviting since the mine shut down. Still, good to see someone trying to breathe a little life into it." He wandered amongst the haphazard stacks of forgotten things. Tried and chipped china dolls, tarnished silverware, moth-eaten tapestries, the detritus of lives lived and lost. Leo been collecting it for months, driving out to estate sales and auctions, building an inventory of stories he didn't need to know. "Find anything for your granddaughter?" Leo asked. Knowing the answer, Hemlock's granddaughter, Lily, lived in Phoenix, and he spoke of her constantly bemoaning her city ways. "She wants one of them, whatchamacallit's a phone, says she can live without it." "What good is a phone when you ain't got nobody to call?" He paused by a stack of vintage radios. Used to be, people talked face to face. Now it is all airwaves and whispers. "Times change, Mr. Hemlock. Change ain't always improvement, son." Hemlock tapped a tarnished brass telescope. "This here is a good piece. See clear as day. They say used to scan the mountains for gold now. There ain't much left to see." He didn't buy anything, of course. Nobody much did. A few tourists drifted through on weekends, hoping to snag a quirky souvenir. Mostly Leo spent his days cataloging, cleaning, and trying to ignore the gnawing emptiness that had settled in his chest. He told people his name was Leo Maxwell. It wasn't it was a name he picked up in New Orleans, shed along with a particularly messy entanglement involving a crooked card game and a very angry wife. Too, he remembered a life painted in brighter, sharper colors. Paris, under a haze of cigarette smoke and jazz. Buenos Aires, slick with rain and secrets. Marrakech, a labyrinth of spices and shadows. Each city a new canvas for a new persona. He'd been Julian Vance then, an art dealer with a knack for spotting undervalued masterpieces, and an even greater knack for convincing people they were seeing things that weren't there. He charmed women, outsmarted rivals, and left a trail of broken promises and empty bank accounts in his wake. A flash of a marble-floored gallery in Rome, a woman with emerald eyes, her laughter echoing in his ears. Isabella, he hadn't thought of her in years. The memory was bittersweet, a pang of something he couldn't quite name, guilt perhaps, or regret. He used her, of course. They all blurred together after a while. The faces, the names, the cities, he'd been good at it. Too good, the elaborate cons, the meticulous planning. The effortless deception, phooey, it had been a rush. Until it wasn't, until he nearly got caught in Prague. A situation involving a forged Rembrandt and a very persistent Interpol agent. That had been his wake-up call. He vanished, leaving Julian Vance to become Arthur Finch in Istanbul, then Daniel Bell in Lisbon, finally settling, or attempting to settle, as Leo Maxwell in Jerome. He hadn't touched a con in 5 years. 5 years of quiet. 5 years of pretending to be someone he was. But this time, pretending was the point. The bell above the door jingled again. This time, the visitor was different. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that seemed wildly out of place in Jerome. Dusty Main Street. His shoes were polished to a mirror sheen. He carried a leather briefcase, expensive and understated. He didn't look like a tourist. He didn't look like anyone who frequented antique shops. "Good morning," the man said, his voice smooth and cultivated. He didn't bother to browse. He didn't even glance at the cluttered displays. His eyes, a piercing shade of gray, fixed on Leo. "Morning," Leo replied, keeping his voice neutral. "Can I help you find something?" The man offered a small, enigmatic smile. "Perhaps, though I am not sure what it is I am looking for." He slowly circled Leo, as if assessing him. "Interesting collection, quite eclectic." "It is what it is," Leo said. Feeling a prickle of unease, the man wasn't looking at the antiques. He was looking through them, at Leo. "You are a newcomer to Jerome, aren't you? A few months now. Trying to make a go of it. An ambitious undertaking in a town like this." He paused, his gaze lingering on Leo's hands. "You have craftsman's hands. Not what one would expect from an antique dealer." Leo clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain calm. He'd been a mechanic once, a long time ago, before Julian Vance, before the art world, before the endless reinventions. "I dabble." "Indeed," the man continued to circle, his eyes missing nothing. "You have a particular quality, a certain stillness. It is almost disarming." "I try to keep a low profile," Leo said, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "A wise strategy for a man of your talents." The man stopped directly in front of Leo, his gray eyes locking onto his. "Have you always been in the antiques business?" "On and off," Leo replied, carefully vague. "It is a peaceful life." "Peaceful." The man repeated the word as if tasting it, finding it wanting. He finally broke eye contact, turning to examine a chipped porcelain doll. "Do you specialize in anything in particular?" "Not really, whatever catches my eye." "Thoughtful," the man paused. "I was speaking to Mrs. Abernathy at the diner. She mentioned you recently acquired a collection from the estate of old man Hemlock's aunt, Martha. She had quite the reputation for hoarding." "That is right," Leo said, genuinely surprised. He hadn't mentioned the Hemlock estate to anyone. "I did. A lot of knickknacks, mostly." The man turned, his gaze piercing once more. "Did that collection include a locket? A tarnished silver locket, heart-shaped, with a floral design?" Leo's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't even catalogued that part of Hemlock. S.Auntie's estate. It was tucked away in a box in the back, waiting for his attention. Why was this man asking about a locket? It was just an old piece of jewelry, wasn't it? I don't recall," Leo stammered, his carefully constructed composure beginning to crumble. The man's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "A shame. It was a rather distinctive piece. I understand Martha Hemlock was quite attached to it." He didn't buy anything. He simply turned and walked out, the bell above the door jingle a final, ominous note. Leo watched him go, a cold dread settling in his stomach. Second, the afternoon passed in a blur of forced activity. He rearranged displays, dusted shelves, and desperately tried to convince himself that the man was just a curious eccentric. But the man's questions lingered, echoing in his mind. The locket. Why the locket? He found it late that night, buried at the bottom of a cardboard box in the back room. The silver was indeed tarnished, almost black in places, but the heart shape and the delicate floral design were still visible. He flipped it open. It was empty. No photograph, no inscription, nothing. He almost threw it away, destroyed it, but something stopped him. A nagging feeling that this wasn't just about a missing locket. It was about him. It was about his past. He was about to lock up for the night when the bell above the door jingled again. He froze, his hands still on the lock. The man in the tailored suit stood silhouetted in the doorway, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Mr. Maxwell," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I believe you do remember the locket after all. Tell me who gave it to Martha Hemlock." The fluorescent bulb above Leo flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across yesterday's echoes. Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside him. He hadn't locked the door, couldn't Julian Vance. That is who the man was, a name he hadn't heard in years. A ghost from a life he desperately tried to bury. Vance hadn't bothered with pleasantries. He'd simply walked in, radiating a predatory calm that made Leo's skin crawl. "You're a difficult man to find, Leo," Vance said, his voice laced with amusement. "Or perhaps you simply prefer to remain hidden." "What do you want?" Leo asked, his voice tight. He reached for the heavy wrench he kept under the counter, his hand closing around the cold steel. Just in case, Vance chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. Such hostility, I assure you. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm a collector of certain items, and I believe you have one of them. The locket, Vance's smile widened. Indeed, a rather extraordinary piece with a fascinating history. It belonged to Eliza Hemlock, Martha's grandmother. Quite the woman. By all accounts, a singer, a dancer, and a confidante of Jasper Blackwood. The name sent a jolt through Leo, Jasper Blackwood. The mining baron, a legend in these parts, a ruthless man who'd struck it rich during the silver boom, then vanished without a trace. Along with his fortune, I don't know what you're talking about, Leo said. Though his voice lacked conviction, Vance ignored him, stepping closer. Blackwood was rumored to have hidden his wealth somewhere in these hills. Gold, silver, jewels, enough to make a king jealous. And Eliza Hemlock knew where. He paused, letting the information sink in. The locket is the key. Leo stared at him, his mind racing. A hidden treasure. It sounded like something out of a dime novel. But Vance was serious, and he had a way of turning fiction into reality. I just bought it at an estate sale, Leo said, hoping to sound nonchalant. It is just an old piece of jewelry. Don't insult my intelligence, Leo. You've always had a talent for acquiring things, and a remarkable ability to disappear when things get complicated. Vance's eyes narrowed. I want the locket, and I want to know everything you've discovered about it. Subaltern Vance left Evertuin with a chilling promise to return through, and Leo practically tore the shop apart. He examined the locket again, turning it over and over in his hands. It was heavier than it looked. And then, he noticed something. A tiny seam, almost invisible, running along the inside edge of one of the heart's curves. He carefully inserted the tip of a pocket knife into the seam. With a soft click, a hidden compartment sprang open, revealing a tightly folded piece of parchment. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. It was a fragment of a map, drawn in faded ink on brittle paper. The edges were torn and worn, but enough remained to discern the outlines of the surrounding mountains and a winding canyon. A single X marked a spot near a distinctive rock formation he vaguely recognized. Blackwood's treasure. Could it be true? He'd spent his life chasing illusions. But this felt different. This felt real and dangerous. Sointwincy spent the next 2 days devouring every scrap of information he could find on Jasper Blackwood. The Jerome Historical Society was a dusty, forgotten room above the library, crammed with yellowed newspapers, faded photographs, and local lore. He discovered that Blackwood had been a secretive man, obsessed with security. He'd built a network of hidden tunnels and secret rooms throughout his mine, and the locals whispered that he'd stashed his fortune somewhere only he knew. He learned that Eliza Hemlock had been Blackwood's mistress, a scandalous affair that had shocked the town. When Blackwood vanished, she disappeared as well, resurfacing years later as a quiet, unassuming widow. The map fragment was frustratingly incomplete. It showed a specific area, but lacked any landmarks to pinpoint the exact location of the treasure. He spent hours studying topographical maps, comparing them to the fragment, trying to find a match. He identified the canyon as Weaver's Gulch, about 10 miles outside of Jerome. But the rock formation, that was the key. He needed someone who knew the area intimately, someone who understood its secrets. Idine Elsie Montgomery ran the local diner, a greasy spoon that served the best pies in Arizona. She was a Jerome institution, a woman in her late 70s with a sharp wit and an encyclopedic knowledge of the town's history. She'd seen generations come and go, heard countless stories, and remembered everything. She'd also seen through Leo's fabricated persona from day one, but she hadn't pressed him on it. She just offered a warm smile and a bottomless cup of coffee. He found her polishing the chrome counter one afternoon, the diner mostly empty. He hesitated, wondering how much to tell her. He didn't trust easily, especially after his past life, but he needed her help. "Elsie," he began, his voice low, "I was hoping you could help me with something." She raised an eyebrow, her gaze shrewd. "Depends, is it something legal? I found this," he said, carefully placing the map fragment on the counter. It was hidden inside an old locket. "I think it might be a map to Blackwood's treasure." Elsie's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't react with the excitement he'd expected. Blackwood's treasure, she repeated, a hint of sadness in her voice. That old story, folks have been looking for that for over 100 years. Do you recognize anything on the map? She studied it for a long moment. Her brow furrowed in concentration. She traced a weathered finger along the lines, her eyes scanning the surrounding landscape. That is Weaver's Gulch, all right? And I think I recognize that rock formation. It is called Chimney Rock. It stands out even from a distance. Leo's heart leaped. You're sure, pretty sure. But Leo, Elsie's voice turned serious. Be careful. That treasure, it is cursed, some say. Others have gone looking for it, followed those same trails. They never came back. Never came back, vanished, disappeared without a trace. Some folks say it is the ghosts of Blackwood and Eliza protecting their secret. Others believe there are more earthly reasons. She paused, her gaze meeting Leo's. Jerome has a way of swallowing people whole, son, especially those who come looking for trouble. I appreciate the warning, Elsie, Leo said, a knot forming in his stomach. I'm just looking out for you. You seem like a good man, Leo. Don't let this treasure ruin your life. Swung to Weaver's Gulch the next morning. The map clutched tightly in his hand. The landscape was desolate and unforgiving, a maze of canyons and rocky hills. Chimney Rock loomed in the distance, a solitary spire against the azure sky. It was exactly as Elsie described. He parked his truck on a dirt road and began to hike, following the contours of the map. The terrain was treacherous, the air thick with the scent of sagebrush and dust. He felt eyes on him, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. He scanned the surrounding hills, but saw nothing. He found a small cave hidden behind a cluster of boulders, just below the base of Chimney Rock. The map indicated this was the spot. He entered the cave, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. It was empty. Disappointment washed over him. He'd expected a secret chamber, a hidden tunnel, but there was nothing. Just bare rock and dust. He was about to give up when he noticed something odd. A section of the cave wall looked different, smoother. He ran his hand over the surface, feeling for a seam. He found it, a barely perceptible crack in the stone. He pushed, and the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage leading into the darkness. As he stepped inside, a voice echoed from behind him. Looking for something, Leo. He turned to see Julian Vance standing in the cave entrance, a cold smile on his face. In his hand, he held a pistol. I warned you not to interfere, Vance said, leveling the gun at Leo's chest. The treasure belongs to me. The gun in Julian Vance's hand was a cold weight against the humid desert air. Leo didn't move, didn't breathe. Elsie, who followed him, unnoticed, stood frozen behind him, her face pale. Don't do anything foolish, Leo, Vance said, his voice devoid of emotion. I just want the map, and the locket, of course. Hand them over, and you might just walk away from here. Leo slowly reached into his jacket pocket, his fingers trembling. He pulled out the map fragment. Vance snatched it from his hand, his eyes scanning the faded lines. Clever, Vance said, a sardonic smile playing on his lips. But not clever enough. You should have stayed buried, Leo. Some lives are best left forgotten. Before Leo could react, Elsie lunged forward, swinging her heavy purse at Vance's head. It connected with a satisfying thud, momentarily stunning him. Leo didn't hesitate. He tackled Vance, sending them both sprawling to the ground. A brief, brutal scuffle ensued. Vance was stronger, more practiced in violence. He pinned Leo down, the gun pressed against his temple. You are a fool to interfere, old woman, Vance growled. She is braver than you are, you coward. Leo spat, struggling against Vance's weight. Just when Leo thought he was finished, Elsie grabbed a nearby rock and brought it down on Vance's hand, shattering his grip on the gun. Leo kicked him off, scrambling to his feet. Vance, clutching his injured hand, stumbled out of the cave, cursing under his breath. This isn't over, Leo, he yelled, his voice echoing through the canyon. Not by a long shot. Then he disappeared, leaving Leo and Elsie gasping for breath in the aftermath of the struggle. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. We need to go to the authorities, Elsie said, her voice shaky. Leo shook his head. Vance has connections, and he know I went to the police immediately. He come after you. Elsie, this is my mess. I need to clean it up myself. Don't he be a hero, Leo. This is bigger than you think. Maybe it is, but I started it, and I need to find out what Blackwood was hiding. All right, Elsie said, her jaw set with determination. But we do this my way. We start with the Black Pearl mine. The Black Pearl was Blackwood, Seth's original mine, the source of his fortune. Abandoned for decades, it stood as a grim sentinel against the skyline, a skeletal wreck of timber and crumbling stone. The entrance was partially collapsed, blocked by a tangle of debris. Blackwood built this mine like a fortress, Elsie said, picking her way through the rubble. Tunnels within tunnels, secret passages, hidden chambers. He was obsessed with security. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of damp earth. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the drip, drip of water. They navigated the labyrinthine tunnels with their flashlights, the beams dancing across the decaying walls. Someone's been here recently, Elsie observed, pointing to a set of fresh footprints in the dust. And not too long ago. They followed the footprints deeper into the mine, discovering discarded cigarette butts and a half-empty water bottle. Someone had been searching for something, and they hadn't been alone for long in a small side chamber. They found evidence of a struggle, a broken lantern, a scattering of tools, and a dark stain on the floor that looked suspiciously like blood. This doesn't look good, Leo said, his hand instinctively reaching for his pocket, then remembering he'd lost the wrench in the scuffle with Vance. Someone got hurt here, Elsie said grimly. Maybe worse. Ski over coffee back at the diner. Elsie began to recount the local legends surrounding Blackwood's treasure. They say he made a deal with the devil, she said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. Sold his soul for wealth, and when the time came to pay the price, Blackwood vanished. Taken his fortune with him. Superstition, Leo said, though he could shake off a growing sense of unease, maybe. But there is more to it than that. Old man Tiberius, he used to work in the mine back in the day. He said Blackwood wasn't just greedy, he was ruthless. He'd do anything to protect his wealth, including kill. And what about Eliza Hemlock, Leo asked. Nobody knows for sure what happened to her. Some say she ran off with the treasure. Others say Blackwood silenced her when she threatened to reveal his secrets. Either way, she disappeared into thin air. And the curse, Elsie sighed. The curse is the stories, the warnings. The idea that some things are best left buried. It has kept most folks away from Blackwood as treasure for generations. It hasn't stopped everyone, Leo said, remembering the struggle in the mine. Number it hasn't kitty back at yesterday. As echoes, Leo continued to pore over the map fragment, hoping to find a clue. He remembered Elsie mentioning Blackwood's obsession with secret passages. He began to systematically search the shop, examining every nook and cranny, looking for anything hidden behind a false panel in the back of an old grandfather clock. He found it, a small leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. The journal belonged to a man named Samuel Harding, a treasure hunter who arrived in Jerome in 1938, determined to find Blackwood's fortune. Harding's entry started optimistically, filled with meticulous notes and detailed observations. He spent months researching Blackwood's life, interviewing locals, and exploring the mine, but as the journal progressed, Harding's tone became increasingly paranoid. He wrote about feeling watched, about hearing strange noises in the night. He described a growing sense of dread, a feeling that he wasn't the only one searching for the treasure. "I've found a pattern in Blackwood's tunnels," Harding wrote on page 57, a series of hidden symbols etched into the rock walls. "They seem to be some kind of code, a map within a map. I believe they lead to the treasure chamber." Over the next few entries, Harding documented his attempts to decipher the code, sketching the symbols in the margins of the journal. He became convinced that Blackwood had anticipated someone would try to steal his fortune and had created a series of traps to protect it. "I feel like I am being followed," he wrote on page 72. "Someone is watching my every move. I saw a shadowy figure lurking near the mine entrance last night. I tried to get a closer look, but he disappeared into the darkness." Harding's handwriting became increasingly erratic, his sentences fragmented and disjointed. His paranoia spiraled into full-blown delirium. "He knows I am getting close," he wrote on page 85. "He knows about the symbols. He is trying to stop me. I can feel his presence everywhere." The final entry was a frantic scrawl, barely legible. "He knows he has been watching." The journal ended abruptly, leaving Leo with a chilling sense of foreboding. What had happened to Samuel Harding, and who was he? Was it Julian Vance or something else entirely? Chipped formica countertop felt slick beneath Leo's palm. He spent the early hours sweeping shards of glass and rearranging overturned furniture. Yesterday's echoes looked like a battlefield. Every antique, every carefully curated display had been deliberately smashed or defiled. A crude message was scrawled across the front window in crimson paint. "Stop looking. It wasn't a robbery." Nothing was missing. It was a message. A threat. Vance was sending a clear signal. He meant business. The police, Sheriff Brody, a weary man who'd seen better days, had taken a report but hadn't offered much in the way of reassurance. "Vance is a slippery character," Brody had said, his voice laced with resignation. "Lots of money, lots of connections. We don't get many problems like him out here." Leo hadn't bothered mentioning the treasure, or the map, or Vance's violent methods. He knew Brody wouldn't believe him, and he didn't want to drag Elsie into it. He found Elsie at the diner, already bustling with the morning crowd. She'd heard about the vandalism, and her face was etched with worry. "You need to leave, Leo," she said, pushing a plate of steaming pancakes towards him. "Get out of Jerome. He is escalating. It is going to get worse. I can just run, Elsie." "Not again. You always run, Leo. It is what you do. It is why you are here, pretending to be someone else." Her words stung, hitting closer to the truth than he liked to admit. But he couldn't abandon the search. He needed to know what Blackwood had hidden, and why Vance wanted it so badly. He barely touched his pancakes. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach. He knew Vance wouldn't stop at vandalism. Stivery, he didn't have to wait long. Later that afternoon, Vance cornered him in the alley behind the diner. He was no longer attempting subtlety. He was flanked by two hulking figures, their faces impassive, their hands resting on the butts of their weapons. "Enjoying the scenery, Leo?" Vance asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "Perhaps you should spend more time admiring it, before things get unpleasant." "What do you want?" Leo asked, keeping his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I've been tracking that locket for years, Leo," Vance said, stepping closer. "You underestimate how meticulously I operate. Through auction houses, private collectors, even black market dealers, it always seemed to slip through my fingers, always appearing and disappearing without a trace, until now. And you, of all people, are the one who ultimately resurfaces it. You've been looking for this treasure for a long time. Generations, actually." Vance actually smiled dead. "My family has a vested interest in Jasper Blackwood's fortune. You see, Blackwood was just a mining baron. He was my great-grandfather." Leo stared at him, stunned. "You are a Blackwood, a direct descendant. And I believe what is rightfully ours was stolen from us. That locket holds the key. And you, Leo, have the map fragment. A rather inconvenient combination. A flicker of memory surfaced then, sharp and unwelcome. Istanbul, 2015. He was Arthur Finch then, a smooth, talking art dealer specializing in Ottoman antiquities. His most ambitious con yet, a forged miniature portrait of Suleiman the Magnificent sold to a shadowy Russian oligarch for an exorbitant sum. The client, Dmitry Volkov, had been ruthless, powerful, and completely amoral. He demanded absolute authenticity, employing a team of experts to verify the painting. Leo had managed to pull it off barely. It had been a dance on the edge of a razor, a game of deception with terrifying stakes. He thought he'd left that life behind. He thought he'd escaped the consequences. But Vance was a reminder that the past always comes calling. "You think you are entitled to something that doesn't belong to you," Leo said, trying to project an air of defiance he didn't. Feel entitlement has nothing to do with it. It is about restoring a legacy. My family's legacy, Vance paused, his gaze locking onto Leo S.I. I'm a reasonable man, Leo. I am willing to negotiate, hand over the map fragment. And I'll let you walk away. You can go back to your quiet life, be the antique dealer you pretend to be. No harm done. And if I don't Vance's smile vanished, then things will get complicated, very complicated for you. For Elsie, for anyone you happen to care about, this isn't a game, Leo. I protect what is mine, and you stumbled into something you don't. Understand? He leaned closer, his voice a low threat. Consider this a final warning. Asterisk, asterisk, Frithy ladder, pacing the confines of yesterday. Echoes, Leo realized the gravity of their situation. Vance wasn't just after the treasure. He was ruthless, possessive, and willing to use anyone and anything to get what he wanted. And he knew things about Leo's past. Things that made the carefully constructed facade of Leo Maxwell feel dangerously fragile. He went back to Harding's journal, searching for any clue, any hint that might explain Blackwood's motives, or Vance's family history. He found a passage that chilled him to the bone. Blackwood was merely driven by greed, Harding had written. He believed he was protecting something beyond wealth. He spoke of a burden, a responsibility, passed down through generations. He hinted at a secret society, a hidden influence that controlled the fate of Jerome and its minds, a society that would stop at nothing to preserve its power. The implication was terrifying. Was Vance part of this society? Was the treasure not just gold and silver, but something far more significant? He needed to understand the full extent of the danger. He needed to find out what Blackwood had been protecting. He needed to find out who 30 or what Thefrid was pulling Vance's strings. He decided to visit Elsie. He needed her wisdom, her local knowledge, and her unwavering courage. He found her closing up the diner, her face etched with concern. He came by earlier, she said, her voice barely a whisper, asked about you, asked about my family. It was unsettling. He is trying to intimidate us, Leo said. He is trying to control us, and he will if we let him. As he prepared to leave, Elsie stopped him, her hand resting on his arm. Be careful, Leo. I have a bad feeling about this. A very bad feeling, he managed a weak smile. I will. But as he stepped out into the night, a chilling premonition settled over him. He was caught in a game far more dangerous than he ever imagined, and Julian Vance was holding all the cards. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his heart pounding. It was a text message from an unknown number. Asterisk, hand over the map fragment. Leo, consider it an act of self-preservation. Failure to comply will have consequences for you and those you cherish. The air hung thick and heavy with the scent of dust and decay as Leo and Elsie ventured deeper into the Black Pearl mine. Harding's journal had provided the final piece of the puzzle, a series of symbols corresponding to specific rock formations visible only from a certain angle at dawn. They'd spent the morning meticulously charting the formations, cross-referencing them with the map fragment. It is behind the Devil's Tooth, Elsie said, pointing to a jagged rock spire that pierced the sky. There is a collapse point marked on one of the original mine surveys. They sealed it off after a cave-in. They found the sealed entrance easily enough, hidden behind a pile of rubble and overgrown with thorny bushes. It was a narrow crevice, barely wide enough to squeeze through. Leo used a crowbar to pry away the remaining rocks, revealing a dark, forbidding passage. Be careful, Elsie warned, shining her flashlight into the darkness. This whole place could come down around our ears. The passage sloped downwards, winding deeper into the heart of the mountain. The air grew colder, the silence more profound. They moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the gloom, and then they found it. A heavy oak door, reinforced with iron bands, stood at the end of the passage. It appeared untouched by time, a stark contrast to the decaying mine around it. This is it, Leo breathed, his hand trembling as he reached for the handle. Before he could turn it, a voice echoed from behind them. Impressive. I must admit, you're more resourceful than I gave you credit for. Julian Vance stood at the entrance to the passage, flanked by his two hulking henchmen. He was smiling, a predatory gleam in his eyes. How did you? Elsie stammered. I've been tracking your every move, Elsie, Vance said, his voice smooth and menacing. Let's just say I have friends in low places. Sheriff Brody included. He turned his attention to Leo. You really thought you could outsmart me? A petty con man playing archaeologist. How amusing. Leo clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain calm. What do you want, Vance? What I've always wanted. The map fragment and the treasure, of course. He gestured to his henchmen. Don't try anything foolish. I have no qualms about using force. One of the henchmen stepped forward, blocking Leo's path. Another positioned himself between Elsie and the exit. Let her go, Leo said, his voice cold. Vance laughed. You're in no position to make demands, Leo. She is insurance, a guarantee of your cooperation. He raised his hand, signaling his henchman. Show him we mean business. The henchman moved towards Elsie, his hand reaching for his weapon. Leo's mind raced. He couldn't fight them head-on. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and Elsie's life was on the line. He needed to use his skills, his instincts to turn the tables. He remembered a lesson he'd learned long ago. As Julian Vance, in the back alleys of Prague, always exploit your opponent's arrogance. Always underestimate their intelligence. You know, Vance, Leo said, his voice deceptively casual. I've been thinking about your family history, about Jasper Blackwood. It is a fascinating story. Vance raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. What about it? He wasn't just a miner, was he? He was involved in something else, something illicit. Leo let the implication hang in the air. What are you implying? I've been studying the original mine records, and I've discovered some discrepancies, some unusual transactions. It seems Blackwood wasn't just extracting silver from the mountain. He was concealing something. Vance's expression darkened. Lies, fabrications. Are they? Or are you afraid to find out the truth? Perhaps Blackwood wasn't protecting a fortune. Perhaps he was protecting a secret. A secret your family has been desperately trying to bury for generations. Leo had noticed a particular fondness Vance held for his pocket watch, a heavy gold timepiece he'd constantly fiddled with. He'd also noted the pride Vance displayed when he spoke of his lineage. He was a man consumed by his family's history. I'm willing to bet, Leo continued, that the real treasure isn't gold or silver. It is information documents, something that could ruin your family's reputation. He saw a flicker of doubt cross Vance's face. He was hooked. Show me, Vance demanded, his voice barely a whisper. Show me what you found. Of course, Leo said, a deceptive smile playing on his lips, but I need to access the control panel, to activate the chamber's lighting system. It is too dark to see anything. He gestured towards a small, rusty control box mounted on the wall near the oak door. It was a gamble, but it was the only chance he had. Vance hesitated for a moment, then nodded to his henchman. Let him, but keep a close eye on him. Leo approached the control box, his hands shaking. He flipped a series of switches, activating a network of ancient electrical circuits. The chamber hummed to life, revealing its contents, a vast, cavernous space filled with crates, chests, and stacks of wooden boxes. But as the lights flickered on, Leo activated something else, a hidden mechanism, a pressure plate cleverly concealed beneath the control box. The ground began to tremble. What have you done? Vance roared, his eyes wide with terror. A little something I learned from a demolition expert in Marseille, Leo replied, a grim satisfaction spreading across his face. Consider it a parting gift. The chamber started to collapse. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. The oak door groaned and buckled under the strain. Get out, Elsie screamed. Leo grabbed Elsie's hand and pulled her towards the entrance. Vance, momentarily stunned, was slow to react. His henchmen scrambled to follow him, but it was too late. A massive section of the ceiling collapsed, blocking the passage. The chamber was sealed. Leo, Elsie, and Vance were trapped, buried alive in the darkness. The roar of the collapsing mine echoed in Leo's ears, a symphony of destruction and despair. Dust filled his lungs, choking him with every breath. He coughed, spitting out grit and debris. Elsie was beside him, her face contorted in pain. Clutching her arm, a shard of rock had pierced her skin. Are you all right? He shouted over the din, his voice hoarse. Just a scratch, she gasped, her face pale. We need to get out of here. The tunnel was a chaotic mess of fallen rocks, twisted metal, and splintered timber. The air was thick with the smell of dust and damp earth. Every tremor, every creak of the weakened structure sent a fresh wave of panic through Leo. He scanned the wreckage, looking for a way forward. The passage was partially blocked, but he spotted a narrow gap in the debris, a precarious path leading towards the mine entrance. "This way," he shouted, pulling Elsie along with him. They crawled through the gap, navigating the treacherous terrain. Rocks shifted beneath their feet, threatening to bury them alive. The air grew thinner with each passing moment, their lungs burning with exertion. "It is no use," Elsie wheezed, collapsing against a rock wall. I can't go on." Leo knelt beside her, desperately trying to encourage her. "You can, Elsie. Just a little further. We're almost there." But he knew she was right. Their chances were dwindling with every breath, and he could hear Vance, behind them, his voice a guttural rasp. "Don't think you can escape me," he roared. "The treasure is mine, and I'll kill you both before I let you leave this mine." Time Pointow's past slammed into him then, a tidal wave of grief and regret. He hadn't just walked away from the con artist lifestyle. He'd tweed ruin from the guilt. From the consequences. He'd been Julian Vance in Barcelona, seducing a prominent art historian, Dr. Alana Reyes, into authenticating a forged Goya. She'd believed him, trusted him. Her career had been ruined when the forgery was exposed. More tragically, the scandal had driven her to suicide. He'd felt the weight of her death ever since, a constant, gnawing ache in his soul. It was the reason he tried to disappear, to reinvent himself as someone else, to atone, in some small way, for the damage he'd caused. He'd believed he'd succeeded in burying that part of his life. But Vance, somehow, had found a way to resurrect it. He pushed the memories aside, focusing on the present. He couldn't afford to succumb to despair. He had to save Elsie. He had to get them both out of this mine. He helped Elsie to her feet, supporting her weight as they continued their struggle towards the exit. He ignored Vance's threats, his voice growing fainter with each step. They finally reached a relatively stable section of the tunnel, a small alcove shielded from the worst of the collapse. Leo used his shirt to bandage Elsie's wound, stemming the bleeding. "We need to rest," he said, his voice exhausted. They huddled together, catching their breath, listening for any sign of further collapse. The silence was broken only by the occasional drip of water and the faint echo of Vance's distant shouts. Then Leo noticed something, a glint of metal reflecting the beam of his flashlight. He turned towards the source, and his eyes widened in disbelief. A small, hidden chamber concealed behind a false wall. Inside, stacked neatly in wooden crates, weren't gold bars or jeweled artifacts. It was documents and ledgers, contracts, letters, meticulously detailing Blackwood's illegal mining practices. Records of bribes paid to local officials, forged permits, and a systematic cover-up of environmental damage. "What is all this?" Elsie breathed, her voice filled with astonishment. "It is not gold," Leo said, his voice heavy with realization. "It is proof of Blackwood's corruption, proof that he built his fortune on lies and deceit. It was the truth Vance's family had been so desperate to protect, and it explained why Blackwood had gone to such length to conceal it." They started rifling through the documents, piecing together the puzzle. Blackwood hadn't just been a ruthless businessman. He'd been a criminal. He'd exploited the land, manipulated the law, and ruined countless lives. "He got away with it for so long," Elsie said, her voice trembling with anger. "All this time people suffered while he lived like a king. Not anymore." Leo said, his gaze hardening. "This will come to light. It has to." Suddenly, a crash reverberated through the tunnel. Vance, battered and bruised, stumbled into the alcove, his eyes blazing with fury. "You're not going to ruin my family's legacy," he shrieked, lunging towards Leo. Leo dodged the attack, sending Vance crashing into a pile of crates. He scrambled to his feet, his hand reaching for a nearby rock. "Stay back, Vance," he warned. But Vance was relentless. He charged at Leo again. Fueled by desperation and rage, a scuffle ensued, a brutal, desperate struggle for survival. During the fight, a section of the tunnel roof collapsed, sending a cascade of rocks tumbling down. Vance was knocked to the ground, his legs pinned beneath a heavy boulder. He screamed in agony, his face contorted with pain. "Help me," he pleaded, his voice raspy. "Please, I'll give you anything. Just get me out of here." Leo hesitated. He could leave Vance to his fate. He could take Elsie and escape. He could finally be free from the past, but he couldn't. He couldn't abandon another person to suffer. He started to carefully remove the rocks, one by one, trying to free Vance's legs. "Don't bother," Elsie said, her voice weak but firm. "He is not worth saving." "I can't just leave him to die," Leo said, gritting his teeth with effort. "You have to. We need to get out of here, now." He glanced at Elsie, her face pale and drawn. He knew she was right. Their time was running out. He managed to shift enough rocks to partially free Vance's legs, but as he did, he noticed something clutched tightly in Vance's hand. A stack of documents, signed copies of the incriminating evidence they discovered. Vance had found his personal stash. "Take them," Vance gasped, his voice barely audible. "Burn them, destroy them. Just protect my family." Leo looked from Vance to Elsie, his mind reeling with conflicting emotions. He could save himself, he could save Elsie, but he had a choice to make. He looked at Elsie, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded, her expression resolute. "We leave them," she said, her voice firm. "The truth needs to be told." A final tremor shook the mine. A massive section of the tunnel wall collapsed, sealing off the exit. Leo grabbed Elsie's hand, and together they turned and ran, pushing deeper into the darkness, leaving Vance cornered beneath the rockfall, clutching the incriminating evidence, destined to share Blackwood's fate. His last words echoed in their ears. "You haven't heard the last of the Blackwoods." They made a desperate dash towards what they hoped was a secondary exit, whilst the mine groaned and settled around them, a tomb of secrets. The dust stung Leo's eyes, blurring his vision. He wasn't thinking about escape anymore. He was thinking about Vance trapped, injured, clutching those damning documents. Elsie was right. The truth needed to be told. But leaving Vance to die wasn't the answer. Not this time. Not after Alana Reyes. He ignored Elsie's protests and resumed shifting the rocks, his muscles screaming in protest. Each movement sent tremors through the unstable tunnel, threatening another collapse. But he pressed on, fueled by a desperate determination. "Help me," Vance rasped, his voice weakening. "Just get them out, get the documents out." Leo steeled his resolve and, with a final surge of strength, managed to dislodge the last of the rocks. Vance's legs were broken, twisted at an unnatural angle. Pain contorted his face, but he clung to the documents, his knuckles white. "Let me help you," Leo said, his voice devoid of judgment. Vance stared at him, suspicion warring with relief. "Why?" "Because I made a mistake once before," Leo said, his voice raw with emotion. "And I am not going to make it again." He carefully splinted Vance's legs with salvaged timber and bandages, improvising a makeshift stretcher. Elsie, despite her injuries, helped him hoist Vance onto it, her movements surprisingly strong. "We need to move now," she urged. "This whole place is coming down." They dragged Vance through the debris-strewn tunnel, their progress agonizingly slow. The mine groaned and shuddered around them, a constant reminder of the impending collapse. Just as they reached a narrow passage leading towards the surface, the roof caved in behind them. Cutting off their escape route, they were trapped once again. But this time, Leo didn't panic. He remembered a ventilation shaft, a small opening he'd noticed earlier in their exploration. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. He instructed Elsie to stay with Vance while he scouted ahead. He crawled through the narrow shaft, pushing and wriggling his way forward, ignoring the scrapes and bruises. Finally, he emerged into the cool desert air, blinking against the sunlight. ***20, the rescue operation was swift and efficient. Sheriff Brody and his deputies, alerted by Elsie's earlier distress call, were on the scene within hours. They lowered a rope and winch into the ventilation shaft, carefully extracting Vance and Elsie from the mine. Vance was immediately taken to the hospital, his injuries severe but not life-threatening. Leo stood back, watching the scene unfold, a strange sense of calm washing over him. He gave a statement to Sheriff Brody, recounting everything that had happened, including the discovery of the documents detailing Blackwood's crimes. He didn't embellish. He simply told the truth. Brody listened intently, his expression grim. "This changes everything, Leo," he said. "Everything we thought we knew about Blackwood." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. The documents were authenticated by experts, and a full investigation was launched. The truth about Jasper Blackwood's corrupt dealings was finally brought to light, sending shockwaves through Jerome and beyond. Old grievances were aired, forgotten injustices were addressed, and the town began to grapple with its dark past. Elsie became a local hero, her courage and determination celebrated by the community. Leo preferred to stay out of the spotlight, quietly returning to yesterday's echoes. The shop had suffered some damage, but it was nothing he couldn't repair. He spent his days cleaning, organizing, and restoring the antiques, finding a strange sense of fulfillment in his simple tasks. Key visited Vance in the hospital, a week after the rescue. Vance was pale and gaunt, his legs encased in casts. He looked like a broken man. I don't understand, Vance said, his voice weak. Why did you save me? You needed help. Leo said simply, I didn't deserve it. I tried to ruin your life. I threatened Elsie. We all make mistakes, Leo said. I always thought I was entitled to everything, Vance admitted, just like my ancestors. But I was wrong. The treasure, it wasn't about the money, it was about proving my family's worth, it was about clinging to a legacy built on lies. Sometimes, letting go of the past is the only way to move forward, Leo said. Vance nodded slowly, his eyes filled with remorse. I'll cooperate with the authorities. I'll tell them everything I know, Leo smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. That is all I ask. Swid life in Jerome settled into a comfortable rhythm. Leo continued to run yesterday's echoes, but he no longer felt the need to hide, to pretend. He was Leo Maxwell, antique dealer, and that was enough. He found a sense of peace he hadn't known existed. He spent his evenings hiking in the surrounding hills, exploring the rugged landscape and breathing in the fresh desert air. He even started attending the local town hall meetings, offering his opinions on issues affecting the community. One afternoon, while browsing through a stack of old newspapers at the Historical Society, he stumbled upon an article about another forgotten mine in the area the Lost Dutchman's Rest. It was rumored to contain a vast deposit of gold, hidden by a reclusive prospector in the late 1800s. He read the article with a flicker of the old grifter in his eyes. A small smile played on his lips. Perhaps a little research wouldn't hurt, just a little. He closed the newspaper, the scent of aged paper filling his nostrils. He had a feeling Jerome still held a few secrets, and for the first time in a long time, Leo Maxwell was looking forward to uncovering them. Not for the treasure, but for the story. For the truth and, perhaps, for a little bit of peace of mind.